Welcome to another segment of Marriott MBA Today. I'm David Haywood in the studio here with Todd Valentine, who had some significant volunteer experience before his MBA program. And we want to talk a little bit about how to talk about that in interviews. Todd, tell us about what you did before you came to the MBA program.
Sure. So I have an engineering background. I worked as a civil engineer for about 7 years in the Seattle area.
So as an engineer, what kind of projects did you work on?
Yeah, so we worked on a lot of transportation projects, lots of highway expansions, and my specialty was dirt. So anything in the dirt, so the bridge foundation, retaining walls, pipelines, anything in the dirt, that's what I dealt with.
So it's a boy's dream.
A little boy's dream, yeah.
So also before the MBA program, well, I guess maybe we should talk about, as an MBA student now, you're kind of pivoting and you're doing marketing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I really liked my client interactions. My company was a consulting company, so I had a lot of opportunities to interact with clients, and that's what drove me back to school. Hope to do marketing, have more of that client-facing interactions, and help meet customers' needs.
Great. Now you, before the MBA program, also had kind of a unique opportunity in service, giving service to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. What was your position there, and kind of what did that entail?
Sure. So I was called to be a bishop in our ward, and it was in the Linwood Stake Beverly Park ward. It was in July of 2010. So I served in that position for about 3 years before coming back to school.
So the ward is a congregation. How big was your ward?
Yeah. So our congregation, we had about 750 members, and so I oversaw mentoring our members. I oversaw our programs, including like the women's programs, the youth programs, as well as managing budgets and dealing with any welfare.
So as a bishop, I'm sure you had some unique experiences. What are some, or maybe you can give an experience that really stands out?
Yeah, there was one experience that was really unique to what I went through. Is we had in October of 2010 an arson essentially burned our building down.
Oh.
So I got a call early on a Saturday morning from the bishop that shared the building with us, and those early morning calls are never good. And he said, "You better get over here. Our building's on fire."
So actually burned down the building.
Yep, it was a total loss. The building was an older building, didn't have sprinklers, so the fire got up in the attic, and essentially everything collapsed in on itself.
Wow. So as a bishop, and I guess as a leader, what kind of were the steps that you took, or what was your role in that incident?
Yeah. So I got there pretty early in the morning, and I talked with some of the firefighters, as well as some of the public people that came out, like the mayor came out, and I just stayed there and talked with all the members that came out and wanted to see what was happening, and talk them through it and say, this is what's happening, this is what we're going to do. But it was really cool to see some of the things that happened. Our members really pulled together. And came together as a unit and became closer together because of it. And the really cool thing we saw is the outreach from the community. Mm-hmm. We had the local churches like the Methodists. All these churches reached out to us and said, "Hey, we know you lost your building. You want to use ours?" Mm-hmm. And really offering their support. And even the city, the mayor, offering us use of some of their facilities to hold some of our during the week functions. So it was a really cool thing to see the outreach that we received.
So I'm sure that's one leadership opportunity to manage that congregation in a time of, somewhat crisis, to have your building burnt down by an arsonist, and that there's probably tons of other examples where you gave of your time, but also were a leader to this congregation and had to manage resources and different time commitments. How do you then translate that experience to job interviews? How do you talk about these experiences you have as a bishop, which is a fairly significant volunteer calling, really, but a lot of employers and interviewers don't know what that means. So what's kind of been your strategy in doing that?
Yeah, sure. So those experiences there was when I talk about it, it's very much in a leadership. When they're looking for a leadership quality or leadership value, I sort of sometimes pull into some of those stories. And I think the key to those is framing it in the right way.
Yeah.
And you can't just say, I was a bishop for the Mormon church, because they don't understand what that is. So if I'm going to tell a story, I frame it, said I was volunteering at a big volunteer organization, and then I defined my role, and I was an overseer. So I oversaw, I like to talk about an experience I had with the Boy Scouts.
Right.
And so and most people are familiar with the Boy Scouts, so that's a name I can bring up and say, I oversaw the Boy Scouts, and my role was, I wasn't actually day-to-day with the Boy Scouts, but I helped them set goals. I helped staff it. And so I kind of make it so they understand kind of the role that I played and frame it in the right way.
So important to put in terms that people can equate to, what things that they have a background in or knowledge about.
And I obviously avoid the words like, well, I was guided by the Spirit, or things like that. I make it very much business focused. We set goals, or I worked with this person. We set a goal to do this. I pulled in a person to do this, and very much business oriented type of way.
So what advice would you give to people? A lot of MBA students at BYU have served missions or done other volunteer experiences, not just for a church, but for other organizations that might not translate as easily on, just on a simple resume. What kind of advice would you give to explain that service in an interview, or let employers know how they've spent their time?
Yeah. So the first thing I'd say is know your audience. Hopefully, as you prepare for an interview, you know the company and their culture. Hopefully, you even know the person you're interviewing with, and you've seen what their LinkedIn profiles. And make sure, if you're not comfortable telling the story, or you may not think it may not go over well, then don't tell it. For example, as I've interviewed with companies in Utah, I sort of avoid that, because in Utah it can be accepted as really well, or it's sort of taboo as well. So I typically just avoid it. I don't talk about it. But outside of Utah, you have to. It's really about framing and look very, very high level. And then don't get into any specifics or any of the lingo, but say, I oversaw or I led a group, and really talk about those business principles that company's looking for. It's really about knowing who you're talking to, framing it right, and really knowing what that company's looking for, be able to pinpoint that skill that you developed.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you, Todd, for joining us in the studio. Remember, frame your audience, know your audience, frame your experiences, and don't say anything that would make you feel too uncomfortable, so you can say with confidence. We have been joined with Bishop Todd Valentine in the studio, and we appreciate you for watching another episode of Married MBA Today.